My interest actually related to this is that a lot of people ask me, when are we going to send humans to Mars, and when is the government, NASA, going to send humans to Mars? You know, there's nominally this idea that after the moon, humans will go to Mars. And my argument is that the government won't do it because it will cost way too much money to make it safe enough for any government official to sign up to it. But think of the entertainment value. Because you're going to send 3 or 4 people, guaranteed someone would die on the way, pretty much. They're on the way back.
Survivor Mars.
So, absolutely. That's the way it will be funded. It'll be by the entertainment industry. Sorry, I shouldn't be so cynical. Sorry.
Does that mean space travel is going to become a bit of a bucket list? One of the things you do before you die?
Well, I mean, a lot of people want to do it after they die. They want to have their ashes put in space. I think space, commercialization of space, there's a lot of people very interested in doing it. And there's a big buzz and a lot of excitement. And whether it and how it takes off it really isn't clear just because of the economics. But maybe when the economy recovers, you know, there will be enough people who want to do it. There is enthusiasm to go into space and a lot of people who want to pay just to go up. And you know, if I had the money, I think I would do it too. I mean, of course, it'd be fantastic. So there is that side to it, but whether or not we can actually mine asteroids in any viable way. And obviously the way to do it would be with robots, not to send humans. I mean, there are very few things that you really need humans to do. And so somewhat the International Space Station and the servicing of Hubble and so on and so forth is somewhat invented in order to justify putting humans into space, to be quite honest with you. There's very little real bona fide science that is benefited by putting humans up there.
But surely the more complex the work is that you need to do in space, the more complex is the machinery that you're going to need to do it. So in many senses, as it becomes more complex, the more viable it becomes to send human beings to do the work, who will have the flexibility to adapt.
The problem is that the infrastructure for keeping humans alive and putting them up there and keeping them alive is extremely expensive because it's heavy. And so, and humans are heavy. And so usually it would be cheaper to send up another space telescope, to be quite honest, than it would be to put the humans up there and repair it. And I think I'm probably in agreement with Rodney here that there are many, many ways in which it's much more affordable to use robots than it is to use humans. There are very, very few things that you really need humans to do. Harrison Schmitt, the astronaut, would argue, he was the only geologist who went to the moon, he would argue that having a geologist there looking at rocks and picking up rocks was extreme scientific value. But one could also argue just sending 50 robots to bring back chunks full, you would have done the same amount.
I would love to ask Rodney. I mean, I don't know if you were involved in the COG project at MIT with Professor Daniel Dennett, but surely that showed that it's very, very complicated to create a machine which is able to do even a percentage of what a human being is able to do. And if you had to run like an industrial plant or run a mining facility, it might be quite complicated to create a machine which is able to adapt on the fly.
Well, COG was my project. That was me and my students, and Dan, I invited Dan in. It's very hard to make human-level performance, but given a chance, I would go into space in a second. I've even volunteered to go on a one-way trip to Mars. I think that's actually how we're going to get to Mars, one-way trips. It's incredibly cheaper. So that said, I still think that the value of what we can do is with robots in the shorter term, and they don't have to be as flexible as a human because. And if you do look at the economics of the Hubble, we would have been better off sending more Hubbles than repairing the Hubbles, even though I was on a National Academy's committee which recommended sending the shuttle back one more time rather than sending a robot mission, because
Thank you. We have a Colorado instrument on that, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, but that's because we're in a situation now where you weren't going to get funding for another Hubble to replace it. I have a totally different topic I'd like to challenge the audience. You know, I just noticed as we're sitting up here that I noticed the reverence with which the word film is used. It's, you know, this beautiful thing there, and you make these beautiful things, and then they stand as works of art by themselves. But and there was a reference to hundreds of years. I think I think you said something about
film.
Yeah, we'll be doing it for you said we'll be doing it for so long in the future. How do we know that? I mean, silent movies went away. Right now, the gaming industry is very large. But yeah, but it's you know, it's shooting things. But maybe film will be replaced by something which has more interactive narrative. I mean, one of the things that you would object to is the lack of narrative in a lot of the games. But maybe that will come along and there'll be interactive entities, and the nature of film may change. And I'm amused we're talking about the future here, and everyone just assumes that film is going to stay the same, you know, as Polaroid did, as Kodak did, and the nature of things change through technology and science.
I think Sundance is really strategic in using the word storytelling, right? Because that's the thing that I think we can say with some confidence is going to stick around, right? And that's something that is obviously thousands of years old and through the, you know, anyways. And so I think that'll stick around. In an interactive narrative, I live that, you know? I mean, we all live that. And to me, I feel like I get enough interaction in my daily life, and when I want to be told a story, I want it to kind of to be told to me. So I have a feeling that one technology or another, you know, this idea of telling stories will persist.
I mean, celluloid and sprockets may go away, certainly, and I don't think most of us, we're at Sundance at the film festival, so everyone does kind of talk about film with a little bit of excessive reverence, but I think if you really scratch the surface, we're all talking about storytelling, and that could, the most sophisticated video games have immensely complex storylines which are not that, sometimes far more complex than many the storylines of movies. I think that they're two different animals. I don't think that gaming and the experience of gaming and watching movies or TV shows is totally different, and I don't think that one impulse will replace the other any more than, you know, there's been, the death of film has been decried many times. VHS was going to be the end of film, and you could, you know, have a VCR, DVD, and now streaming. But it all comes back to the same thing. They talk about content in Hollywood a lot. You know, the business of providing content, but it does come back to entertaining people, telling stories, or provoking people, and those things can be done all sorts of different ways. Look, how many people watch movies on their iPhone now? Raise a show of hands. Okay, that's a medium to small number. That's really scary to those of us who were crafting the giant screen image, but we have to get used to it. People are going to be watching a lot of our stuff on little teeny things.
I've got 4 kids in their 20s. None of them watch TV. They download things onto their laptops.
That's the reality of it. But you know what? A good movie is a good movie, whether it's a 2-inch by 3-inch screen or whether it's a giant screen. There will always be the purists who love to see things big, but just as there aren't a lot of films made anymore on 70 millimeter or black and white, for example, because the economics don't make any sense, there'll still be, you know, but that becomes this really subspecialty. But the overall thing, storytelling, remains the same regardless of the ultimate medium that it's output through. By the way, I just had a flash to I didn't know that you were the consultant on Minority Report, but I always think of Minority Report on my iPhone whenever I do that with my fingers. I feel like a little mini version of Tom Cruise.
Thanks. I think. And there's a lot more there to be done too. But the same topic has come up a number of times at different panels around the festival this year. At the Created Worlds panel yesterday, and last Friday, a week ago, at the New Frontier panel. And one of the conclusions that came up there, I think, was that it wasn't that we were going to fill in a continuum. Right now, it's a sort of a hegemony. We've got both ends, which is real life on the fully interactive but not always entirely engaging end of the spectrum. And then film and arguably reading novels and stuff like that on the other end, where it's a kind of one-way transmission, and video gaming somewhere in the middle. But it seems that the thing that's really going to happen is that you'll start having finer and finer gradations in between all those things. So at any one moment, it'll be a matter of choice for the individual as to whether it's, whether you want a fully interactive experience or a completely passive sort of, receptive experience or something in between. But I think what is pretty clear is that the people who are counting on maintaining that hegemony better get used to some crowding.
Well, I have a question back for Rodney. Is there going to be a day when one of your sentient or artificially intelligent robots wants to watch a movie? Is that going to be programmed in?
Or perform in one?
No, that's a good question, actually. The closest this has come was actually with COG. We were doing a thing with implementing a version of mirror neurons in order for the COG to understand when someone was grasping something, and that would then tell it how to grasp the thing. And then we put a mirror in front of it. And we hadn't thought about this and watched it imitating itself in the mirror, which was sort of fun. And by the way, it decided that it had a detector for animate versus inanimate motion, and it decided it was animate.
I mean, in terms of this question of when technology wakes up and we can talk to it, or it could decide to destroy us, is that moment of waking up, is that moment of parity anywhere near happening, or is that a big lie, and is it more like this asymmetrical moment where they're physically very capable but mentally kind of dumb?
Well, I think that things didn't turn out the way we thought and the way Hollywood thought with artificial intelligence. Everyone here uses artificial intelligence technology every day. Whenever you do a Google search, it's a big AI engine. Sorry?
You found that little Google app that you can ask the question into your iPhone?
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
So there's a voice.
Yeah, it's a voice recognition.
Yeah, so there's AI in the voice recognition, and so and it's changed the way we live, and it's changed our intelligence by having Google available or other search engines. But the artificial intelligence works because it's still humans at each end who provide either the web pages with the documents and put the stuff there, or you're doing the keyword selection. It's been much harder for us to build robots that can be aware of what's happening around them in the world, and that's the thing that stops them from having more of an inner life that you could observe. So that I think it's very cruel of you to kick that horse robot, but but I have seen the clips of it. But at some point, I think we will, and this gets back to the soul question. As the robots have more of an inner life, and we're trying to put that in them, we will start to feel empathy for them. Even I already feel empathy for robots. and then to me, that's when they have a soul.
And there's an analogous line of thought that's a little bit younger, a decade and a half, that sort of comes out of the new blending of sort of philosophy of mind and consciousness and real clinical work. So there are folks like Rodolfo Yinas at NYU. His book, Eye of the Vortex, is well worth reading. And for the first time, in my view, it sort of starts to creep from first principles, from how molecules and cells arrange themselves, into a description of how that aggregates eventually into mind. And he makes a very convincing argument that not only is it necessary for robots, but it's necessary for organic living beings as well, that plants don't have minds specifically because they never had any need for mobility or motility. And it's the stuff that had to figure out how to move around, either to eat things or avoid being eaten, that had to eventually develop models of the world internal to themselves. And in his view, it begins with irritation. A single cell is capable of being irritated and moving away from it, and hence we are. So let's come back to film or to pictures, just so we don't sound highfalutin with the film thing. The pictures. Can we talk, each of us, a little bit about what the pictures are that have made a difference, either sort of personally in inspiring us, or that we feel somehow have done an unbelievably great job in capturing one little slice of science? Aside from our own, and we have actually an amazing representation here of science-based filmmaking.
Well, I mean, there's a number of films, science fiction films, for me, which had a huge impact on my development. The Outland and Silent Running, the original Alien, and Blade Runner. These are all films that seem to concentrate more on human beings and how they were affected by the science and technology around them, as opposed to being too caught up in what that science and technology was. It was almost a location as opposed to being, an obstacle. And I certainly hope that I'll get the chance to keep on making films like that, which talk about human beings and how they're affected by their environments, which science and technology is really just part of an environment, which that's what Moon is about.
So as a scientist rather than a filmmaker, I would have to say that it was really documentaries. Maybe that's my Asperger's coming out. That influenced me in terms intellectually and got me excited and interested in thinking about science. But particularly the BBC weekly documentaries that I grew up every Monday night watching. But I think that in terms what was important in terms of portraying what a scientist is like, I think Contact is undoubtedly the best one out there in terms of showing not just one scientist, such as the Jodie Foster character, but many others. There are all sorts of, nerds working on computers in the background as well, and so on. People stomping about, different opinions, different scientists being portrayed in a single movie. So I think that, to me, takes the cake for the best portrayal of scientists, which I think is just as important as the portrayal of the science.
I guess I would personally have to name Andromeda Strain, the 1970s Robert Wise film, in which there are only scientists who come together to solve a problem of some bad bugs from outer space. But the activity is all real science stuff and chock full of great equipment. That one was hugely formative. And Brainstorm, also one of Douglas Trumbull's two films, along with Silent Running, which I think does the single best job of any film I know of depicting the progress, the technological and design progress of industrial design. You see the sort of the cognitive reading apparatus as a laboratory object at the beginning with wires trailing everywhere, and over the course of the film, and presumably 3 or 4 years, you see the thing become eventually this sort of streamlined Oakley-like apparatus that you just stick on your head. So that one is, I think, well worth revisiting. And then David Cronenberg's films always stand out as being willing to tackle the idea that it isn't necessarily a single evil scientist at all, that there's just kind of a dialogue, and he's somewhat famous for saying that he's interested in taking the point of view of the virus rather than the virologist.
I think it's really hard to capture how scientists really work, how science itself really works. Science is actually pretty boring. It's incremental. You do one little experiment and it leads to the next one. And what's hard to capture are those exceptional moments where a big leap is taken. And there are a few films that do this very well. There's an old one that to me is hands down the best at showing the sociology, the leap that's taken, and presents the history of science, I think, in a remarkable way. And that's the old Double Helix about Jim Watson's discovery and Francis Crick's discovery of the structure of DNA. It's a very personal story of the competition, the nastiness, the exploiting of others in a terribly frank and open way, which is really often the way science works. It's not a neat, tidy, clean operation. And that, I think, is a special window into that world.
Well, I'm sort of going to surprise myself a little and say that it's a Robin Williams movie, which is the best. Bicentennial Man. I don't know whether people saw that when it came out. It's based on an Isaac Asimov story. Robin Williams is a robot, and over a period of hundreds of years, the robot becomes more biological by putting biological technology into robotics, which is what we're doing now, and at the same time people become more robot-like by having implants into them, and we see that happening today. We see the neural implants starting for medical reasons, and once things, we know from plastic surgery. Plastic surgery started out as being a medical procedure to deal with burns, and now it's become an optional thing. And so we're going to see people becoming more robotic and our robots be more biological, and I think Bicentennial Man was actually a very insightful analysis of that.
I guess two films at the total opposite end of the spectrum in terms of history. One, Metropolis, of course, early cinema, and just spectacular to me use of the genre of science fiction to think about present day social, quite political questions. And then also Michael Winterbottom's Code 46, which to me, one of my obsessions has been the limited palette that science fiction has been painted with, in the sense that we've only seen really the first world in the future. We've seen Los Angeles, London, New York, Chicago, Tokyo, but we've never seen Mumbai or Jakarta or Mexico City or Sao Paulo or the rest of the planet, which most certainly has a future. And Michael Winterbottom's film is a Code 46 is a cross-border futurism, and I think that's important just in terms of the moment we live in, that we're all connected, and so our visions of the future need to be more expansive.
There are a lot of films. I'm on the end of the panel, so I don't know any. Although when you just mentioned Code 46, reminded me of Children of Men, which I liked a lot when it came out. It's not really science fiction, but it's that near future dystopian, and it was sort of the details and the visual palette of that film, which I found really, really striking, and more than sort of when you go back to sort of big question science, I'd also throw in the Twilight Zone, just some of those episodes that just really played with your head, which I think is one of the things that maybe attracts us all to some of these questions. It's taking you and just pushing you out of your sort of the way you see the world into somewhere new, which is the wonderful thing about talking with people like yourselves who are experts in these fields that are just opaque to us most of the time, and we can only get glimpses of them through your work or through maybe sort of popular writings. But that's one of the things I think that our job is as filmmakers, if we can, is to provide a sort of a medium process for something. I always feel privileged when I get paid to write a film about some really obscure subject like that. Like even for Day After Tomorrow, which was a total Hollywood assignment, I got to go to NOAA and sit with the climatologists. I mean, I had no idea what the thermohaline current was before, or the interaction between the levels of salt and fresh water. And there's all these great details I'm learning from these people, and then it ends up, okay, cool, we can freeze New York. But I get paid to have sort of a master class with some of the world's top scientists in an obscure field, and I'm sure that's half the reason Steven Spielberg wants to talk to you about every possible detail, just because he's a curious person, and then he's going to put it in a movie that people are going to see. So.